before.
Right.
It's an
So,
interesting idea. Like, well, there's lots of talk in the Bible about being prepared in general, right? You know, Jesus gives us a lot of warnings about things that are coming, especially in the last days, wars and rumors of wars, and of course, Jesus wanted his people to be prepared for his soon return, like on the grand scale. So the idea of being prepared is, of course, not an unusual subject, but this idea of a day, a preparation day, um, is a little bit different than that, and so it's worth exploring for sure.
yeah, yes. So what would you like to start off with? What I've always known about the preparation day, but I've personally never really actually studied it in depth. So you're going to be kind of teaching me, I think, tonight.
Mm. Well, I think I was born and raised a Seventh Day Adventist, so I'm a third generation Seventh Day Adventist actually, and so
Right.
I grew up with this idea, and and we'll explain that as we go here. You grew up an Adventist too, did you not?
I did. I grew up as an Adventist, but I didn't really start studying it for myself until later on in life, and I started studying more of the things that were a hot topic for me at the time. Preparation day never was a real hot topic, so I never studied it.
Yeah. Yeah, so the first passage that comes to mind, and it's probably one of the few, and I think pretty much all the four Gospels made a reference to it. I know Mark and Luke and John all did. I didn't find one in Matthew. Uh, but we can go to Luke chapter 23,
Okay,
verses 53 to 56.
I'll bring that up for our viewers here if you just give me 1 second.
Yeah,
Um, I just gotta type this all in here. You said that was Matthew?
Luke
Oh, sorry, Luke. Luke, what was the.
chapter 23,
Okay.
and then verses 53 to 56.
Oof.
That's the right end, the end of the chapter there.
All right. Well, we're gonna bring that up here. Um, oh, I guess I shouldn't have done that because it'll literally do exactly what I tell it. Um, let's try that. There we go. I'm just gonna bring that up for our viewers here. Make sure we can read that, and then I'll let you go on. All right. What are we reading here? And he took it down and wrapped it in linen and laid it in a sepulchre that was hewn in stone, wherein never man before was laid. And that day was the preparation day, and the Sabbath drew on. And the women also, which came with him from Galilee, followed after, and beheld the sepulchre, and how his body was laid. And they returned and prepared spices and ointments, and rested the Sabbath day according to the commandment.
So I think this passage here is pretty clear that the preparation day that it's talking about was preparation for the Sabbath,
Right.
like the Jewish Sabbath, and because it says both in there, right? And then it says they rested on the Sabbath. So we can explore that a little bit more if you want to go to John 19, verse 31.
Sure. I'll bring that up here. John 19:31. You said.
Yeah.
All right. I will bring that into our view, and then you can go ahead and read that. You got that working on your side? Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. I'm sorry, Mark. I gotta set some settings on here because it keeps muting you. To our viewers, just in case you're
Oh,
wondering, we're working with some new software here. We're learning as we go, but we're enjoying it what we do. Can you start over again, Mark, with your Bible verse?
Yeah, you can hear me now?
Yep.
Okay, so in verse 31, John chapter 19 says, "Since it was the day of preparation, and so that the bodies would not remain on the cross on the Sabbath, for that Sabbath was a high day, the Jews asked Pilate that their legs might be broken and that they might be taken away. So the soldiers came and broke the legs of the first and then the other who had been crucified with him. But when they came to Jesus, they saw that he was already dead, so they did not break his legs." And so here again, we see that the Jews were requesting, they wanted to take them down off the cross before the Sabbath so that they could, properly bury him. Otherwise, they would have had to leave him up there for the whole next 24 hours.
Right.
And
Right.
so they requested speed up the process.
And I mean, it
So
must have been important because they were willing to break people's legs, and well, I mean, they're on the cross already to begin with, but they were
yeah,
willing to go out of their way to speed up the process because of the Sabbath.
yeah. And so it's interesting in John here too, because um, it says they didn't want the bodies to remain on the cross on the Sabbath, for that Sabbath was a high day. Well, that year that Christ was crucified, it was also at that time the Passover, and you'll see that in the Gospels. Prior to the crucifixion, Jesus celebrated the Passover supper with his disciples, the day earlier, and so it was called a high Sabbath then, because the Jewish Passover, which was a Sabbath day, it actually fell on the Sabbath day that year. So it wasn't just the regular weekly Sabbath that was coming up, but it was an actual high Sabbath because it was also the Passover. And that
Right.
doesn't happen every year. That only happens, I don't know, every few years they'll actually coincide.
Right.
And so this year that Christ died, it was not only the Sabbath, but it was also the Passover. So they wanted to get him down off the cross so they could carry on with their celebrations, I guess.
Okay.
So that's really interesting extra information, because some people might say that, it wasn't the Sabbath, it wasn't the weekly Sabbath, it was just the Passover. But in this year, it was actually both. And John makes that reference here. So we can go back to Luke, but we'll go to Luke chapter 24, verse 1.
Okay. I'll bring that up for our viewers. Luke 24:1, you say?
Yeah.
All right. Might help if I spell things correctly. All right. I will get that up there for our viewers. All right. Yeah, so go ahead and read that, Mark, if you like.
So here it gives us some more information to kind of solidify this idea that it was the weekly Sabbath. It says, "But on the first day of the week, at early dawn, they went to the tomb, taking the spices that they had prepared, and that's when they found the stone rolled away." So here now it's saying, we read a little bit earlier where they wanted to take Christ down off the cross before the Sabbath on the preparation day.
Right.
And then here it says, now on the first day of the week, they're coming to the tomb and the tomb was open. So clearly the first day of the week is Sunday,
Clearly.
So it's only been Sunday. And so then if the Sabbath it was talking about was Saturday, then the preparation day would be Friday.
Right.
Would be what we would deduce from that, right?
Yeah.
So now as we're putting it together, we can see that it was talking about a preparation for the Sabbath, the weekly seventh-day Sabbath.
Right. Yeah, I found that interesting, and you gotta like the Sabbath, preparing for the Sabbath and the Sabbath were so important to these people that they were willing to not embalm their dead.
Yeah, there was a bunch of things. There was a lot of things that they weren't supposed to do on the Sabbath, because the Sabbath is supposed to be a day where you put aside all the cares of the world and your weekly work and all these things. And of course, that would include, embalming the dead and doing all those things.
Mm-hmm.
We want, because God wanted His people to be focusing on Him on His ordained day.
Right. Yeah.
And so it's interesting, because we have this 7-day weekly cycle, but we think about, well, where did that come from? Sunday being the first day of the week, Saturday being the seventh day of the week. And it's interesting because in 45 BC, so this would have been 70 years before this event, was actually when Julius Caesar first established the calendar that we pretty much have today.
Right.
And of course, the calendar tracked the entire year, and then they broke it down into months. And then the months were named after the Greek or Roman gods, and they'd have all these different months. But there's nothing astronomical or anything with the year, with the sun, with the orbits and all that stuff. There's nothing about that has anything to do with the 7-day week. The 7-day week has just been there, and it was actually there before Rome. Babylonian had a 7-day week, and they named each of the days after their gods and after the planets. And they named Sunday after the sun, and they named Saturday or Monday after the moon. And that was already, you can actually see that back way before Rome in the Sumerian and Babylonian. And then the Hellenistic Greeks adapted that 7-day week, naming the days after their gods. And then, of course, then Rome came along, and they just carried on with that. They just kept adapting that. So we have Sunday to the sun god, and we have Monday to the moon god, and then you have all the different days are to different gods or planets or things like that. So the 7-day week nobody really knows where it came from unless you look into God's word.
Right.
And of course, you can go all the way back into Genesis.
That's absolutely right, because there's no rhyme or reason. It's not a man-made thing that the week is, and there's nothing on this planet that cycles it. Like, there's the months cycled by the moon. There's the year cycled by the Earth going around the sun, right? And then there's the rotation of the Earth for the days, right? But there's no cycle for the week except what's written in the scriptures.
Right. And so it's interesting that we can see that back through all these civilizations. Back as far through recorded history, they were doing that 7-day week. I guess Rome, for a while, they did like an 8-day week thing for a while, I guess, but they ended up adapting when Julius Caesar did the calendar. They adapted that 7-day week that the Greeks had been doing. So the only reference to it, of course, is back in the creation account in Genesis, where God created for 6 days, and then on the 7th day he rested and blessed and made that day holy. And of course, we see that repeated in Exodus 20 when God gives the commandments. And when he gives the Sabbath commandment, he says, because for 6 days God created the heavens and the earth, and on the 7th day he rested. So he gives that creation process as the reason for having the weekly Sabbath on the end of the week on the 7th day. So what's interesting, though, is that the 7th day is blessed and hallowed and ordained as a blessed and holy day, but the 6th day is not ever established as anything. And yet in the New Testament, it's referring to it as the preparation day. So I know growing up, I always thought that was a little bit interesting, because I thought, well, there's only one day that God said was a blessed and holy day. So why are we making the sixth day a blessed and holy day too? Like it almost seemed like that's what was happening. I don't know. I don't know what your experience growing up was.
Well, for me, I didn't really like preparation day or the Sabbath that much because I didn't understand the rest that was in it because I was so young. And well, when we're young, we want to have fun, right? We want to go and play with toys and go enjoy life and do whatever we want to do, right? But
Hmm.
when I was growing up, I struggled with the Sabbath, but and preparation day. I always remembered when I was growing up, I really liked wintertime because daylight savings time. It gave me some extra time on the Sabbath to go and do something else or whatever, which it really never did because you're still only 24 hours, right? But as a kid, how you are.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
but anyways, yes,
Yeah. For me.
no, and now that
Yeah.
I'm older, I like now. I love the Sabbath. I'm happy to have the Sabbath. It's something that I actually look forward to now. Which, like, you asked me that 20 years ago, I'd have been like, "Ha, no." But now, no. I'm thankful for the Sabbath. Mm.
Hmm. Hmm. So to understand what we're supposed to be doing, we can go back into the Old Testament. We can go back and look at Israel, and of course, Exodus chapter 16 gives us an interesting lesson that God gave His people. And of course, Exodus chapter 16 happened before Exodus 20, so it would be important to notice that this story took place before Mount Sinai and before the Ten Commandments were written on stone.
Right,
So
right.
this was actually prior to that.
So
And
Exodus
so this
16, what
this is the
verse?
story.
1640.
Uh, let's see. I got verses 5, and then further on in verse 23 to 26.
Okay, I'm just gonna bring up 5, and then we can scroll through it. Or you know what? I'm just gonna bring up the whole chapter, and then we can
Yeah,
just.
it's the whole story in the whole chapter. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So do you want me to bring that up for our viewers? Do you want to start reading that right now?
Yeah, if you can bring up verse 5,
Okay. Just give me
if you
one
can,
second.
or
I
at
will
least
bring
get
up.
focused on that. Yeah.
All right. All right. If you want, I can read verse 5 for you.
Yeah, start on verse 4, actually.
Okay. I just gotta back up our page here. Where we go. All right. Then said the Lord unto Moses, Behold, I will rain bread from heaven for you, and the people shall go out and gather a certain rate every day, that I may prove them whether they will walk in my law or no. And it shall come to pass that on the sixth day that they shall prepare that which they bring in, and it shall be twice as much as they gathered daily. All right. And then you say you want me
So
down
there
at
we have
20?
yeah, go down to 23 to 26, and I'll just make some points here. So
Okay.
it's interesting, as I said, Mount Sinai hadn't happened yet, and God hadn't transcribed His law down on the Ten Commandments yet. But yet here He is. He's making a reference here to say to test them whether they will walk in My law or not.
Right.
This is prior to Him having written it down. So it's
Right.
interesting. And then it says on the sixth day when they prepare what they bring in. So here we have a reference to that weekly cycle again. The sixth day is to prepare. It says right there. And
So
so
are you
here
telling
we see
me, Mark, are you telling me that the Sabbath was not made for the Jews?
well that I'm glad, yeah, I'm glad you made that point, because during maybe a lot of people don't realize this. At the time when Israel was in the desert, they weren't called Jews yet.
Right. Right.
Really, like that really wasn't a thing yet, because you had all the 12 tribes in the desert. and of course, and the tribe of Judah was, of course, one of the tribes.
Right. So they were
But
Israelites. They were
typically,
the
they were all
descendants of
Israelites.
Jacob.
Yeah, this is it. At this time, this is Israel we're talking about, not
Yeah.
specifically Jews. We're talking about all of Israel.
Right. Right.
So it's not correct to say that the Ten Commandments were only given to the Jews, because they weren't, because they were given to the Levites and they were given to the Ephraimites and all the other ites, right?
Yeah,
I can't
exactly.
remember
Yeah.
all the
We
others.
could go down the list of 12.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So the Jewish people are generally the descendants of the tribe of Judah. But at this time, we have all 12 tribes.
Right.
So the Ten Commandments were given to Israel, and then here we have God referring to the law prior to him having even written it down. And so he's testing Israel if they'll walk in his law or not, and yet he hasn't actually written them down on the Ten Commandments yet. So it raises an interesting point, because someone might ask, well, how could they know that the law existed if he hadn't told them yet? And yet he's testing them on something that they don't necessarily know.
That's right. But I think that they did know because they had been told by or taught since the days of Abraham, because Abraham started this all
Hmm.
out, right? So they knew. Now we have to give them some slack. We have to have some understanding for them because I mean they were slaves in Egypt for 400 years, right? So they had been indoctrinated with the Egyptian
Yeah,
uh, pantheism, their gods and all that kind of stuff, right? So when they came out of Egypt, they didn't really have the understanding. They maybe understood the law, but they hadn't really had the opportunity even to do it.
hmm. Well, and it's interesting because then when God did give the Sabbath commandment on Mount Sinai just a little bit later than this, he said, "Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy." You know,
Out
he
of all
wasn't
of
he
them,
wasn't
right? Out
saying
of
it like it
all
was
of
a
them.
new thing. Yeah.
Uh,
Well, and it's interesting that he chose the Sabbath to be a test. That's an important point from that passage. He chose the Sabbath portion of the law to be the test to whether they keep his whole law.
and I think that the
You know,
reason
so that
for that is in my humble opinion, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I have a feeling that the Lord uses the Sabbath as a test because it is the easiest in a way to break. With all the other commandments, like thou shalt not murder. Who
mm,
if you murder, that's
mm,
big
mm,
trouble, right? Thou shalt not steal. Big
yeah,
trouble. You're gonna run into problems, right? Don't commit
yeah,
adultery. All these other ones, we can see immediately the outcome of those sins, right? We know where it's going to lead. Whereas with the Sabbath,
right.
it's like I'm just, what do you mean the Sabbath? I'm just taking a day off to rest. What, spend time with God. I don't understand. Like what significance is that? And that's I guess I'm
Hmm.
playing devil's advocate in that respect because I understand where we're going with this. But you know,
Yeah,
even like when I grew up, as I was growing up, I understood about the Sabbath and everything, but it wasn't until later on in life that it had its importance for me, right? Um, it wasn't until I started to understand how God works that I was like, oh, this is really, really important, right? And so,
hmm, hmm. So I'll just skip ahead to 23 here, verse 23 of the same chapter there, just to solidify it. He says to them, on the sixth day they gathered twice as much bread. And when the leaders of the congregation came and told Moses, he said to them, this is what the Lord has commanded. Tomorrow, so the seventh day of the week, is a day of solemn rest, a holy Sabbath to the Lord. So bake what you will bake and boil what you will boil, and all that is left over lay aside to be kept till morning. And so they did, and it did not rot away. There was no worms in it. It was actually preserved. And they said, eat it today, for today is a Sabbath to the Lord. For 6 days you shall gather it, but on the seventh day, which is a Sabbath, there will be none. On the seventh day, some of the people went out to gather, but
and
they
there was none.
found no manna.
Yeah.
There was none. So how long will you refuse to keep my commandments and laws? The Lord says. Again, this is before he actually wrote them on the Ten Commandments. So he's really driving home this seventh day sacredness here. He's really, trying to train them here, the importance of being prepared for the Sabbath. Get your food all ready beforehand, get all this other stuff done. There's other references earlier before Egypt, before the captivity in Egypt, in Jacob's time, where he was going before the Lord in at Bethel, and he told his family, wash yourself and take off your jewelry and put away your false idols and purify yourself. And he was like, go through this whole thing because we're going to go before the Lord. So there was this idea almost 500 years earlier that we need to prepare ourselves before we go before the Lord.
Right.
And so it was just a theme that was carrying through. And then when we get to the Exodus, as you said, once these people were in captivity for 400 years and polluted with all the paganism, then they needed to be retrained and retaught God's way, God's laws.
Yeah. Well, I find this very, very fascinating. I think it's been pretty good to study this with you. I think we should probably end it here, though. We're at 29 minutes.
Yeah.
So
So let me just summarize that real quick then.
sure.
So the idea is then is it can, life is hard, and it's hard for us even more in different ways in our modern world. But it's easy to get distracted with a lot of things, with what's going on in the news and with what's going on in the world around us, things with the government and whatnot. And people that live in the cities, they have a whole another slew of things. And so the Sabbath is a time that we can put all that stuff aside and not have to worry about that. And we want our minds to be on God and on things that are holy. And it's hard to just turn the switch off. And so this idea of the preparation day is to put the effort in to tie up all the loose ends. You make sure your vehicle's full of gas. I dropped the ball on that one the other day.
I hear you, man.
Get your groceries bought. Make sure you got your firewood all split so that when the Sabbath comes, you can focus on God. You can take time out and study His Word. You can take time out to pray, and you're not constrained by time going, oh, I got to get home and split firewood because it's already
Right.
done.
Yep, it's already done. And you know what? It's a
Yeah.
time of relaxing, and it's I find it, to me, the Sabbath shows the love of God. When I was younger, I didn't see it that way. I saw it as more of a mean parent telling me I can't go and have fun. And but as I've
Hmm.
gotten older, I look at the Sabbath as a sign of God's love, and that well, I like to go back to creation.
Yeah.
Like we say, God created the heavens and the earth in 6 days, right? And then He rested on the Sabbath. Well, He created Adam and Eve on the sixth day, and then He rested on the Sabbath
Yeah.
day. So, what was Adam and Eve's first day being alive? It was resting with the Lord, right?
Yeah.
So that's
Wonderful.
how
Hmm.
I like to look at the Sabbath. Is God has set a day apart for Him as well, to rest with us, to visit with us, to hang out with us, right? So
Hmm.
that means, that also shows how important humanity is to God, that He would take the time out to rest each week, one day each week, with humanity, right? So
Yeah. Yeah.
to me, that just shows the love of God. That shows that He cares so much about humanity, us humans, that He would take a day out each week to visit with us.
Yeah. And it's a pattern that He established, and it's interesting because He established that pattern before sin entered the world.
That's right. Yeah.
So we don't keep the Sabbath because of sin, because God instituted it when there was no sin.
That's right. Yeah.
The word Sabbath actually means rest,
Yeah.
and so it's a wonderful thing. The rest is a wonderful thing, and so I just that was the idea behind this show as well. And so I'm really hoping that we can take this time and people will start watching and joining us on Friday evenings. We're shooting for 7 o'clock. Just a nice little half-hour show where we can get into God's word and focus on God a little bit more and start to condition our minds for a day of rest with the Lord.
I agree.
And we can put away all these things, put away the stresses from the week, and start conditioning our minds to be ready to meditate on God.
Amen, brother. Well, Mark, I really appreciate that you came on and did this today. This was really good. Opened my eyes to some new ideas. I'm sure that there'll be others that have ideas, it'll open their eyes to new ideas as well. And to anybody that's viewing online, we would love to see you next week. We're going to do this every week. And, if you have something that you would like to study with us, maybe you can write that down in the comments, and we can consider bringing that up in a further episode. Well, I think we'll end it right here. So, to everyone out there, thank you so much for viewing, and we will see you next week. God bless. Join us live March 26 as Mark Willauer continues his study in the book of Daniel. This week's title is The Image of the Kingdom.